Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be reviewing the S.H.Figuarts Denji from the series Chainsaw Man. Now this is the fourth Figuarts released in the line, and Tamashii did a pretty good job right out of the gate with the actual Chainsaw Man and the power. I didn't get the Katana Man. It seemed like a pretty decent figure as well, and this Denji shares a lot in common with the actual Chainsaw Man figure, minus the chainsaw head and arms. So the posability on the original Chainsaw Man and the figure as a whole was pretty good, just lacking a bit in accessories. And effectively the Denji will make up those accessories, especially since there is quite a bit of cross-compatibility between the figures. Now there was a little bit of a debate originally about how the actual Chainsaw Man figure had fewer accessories than the Figma, and you couldn't change him between chainsaw form or Denji form, whereas the Figma could, but overall the posability and sculpt I felt was better for the Chainsaw Man because it had blood detail, some shading, and just some really good posability, as well as a lower price point. But then Tamashii Nations announced the Denji, and between the two figures you basically got about the same as you would the Figma, except you'd have two fully separate figurines instead of one figure that has a bunch of options. Anyway, enough about that. We're talking about Denji today, and like I said, he shares a lot in common with the Chainsaw Man figure, which is expected, but there are some slight differences in the sculpt, which does not really affect posability, but does affect the actual aesthetic of the figure. So, taken out of the box, you can see what we're dealing with. So he's got 5 faces, he comes with a Pochita, which also has 3 faces, he comes with a bunch of different hands, an axe, a magazine, an alternate moving tie, as well as a ripcord that can fit underneath his tie to simulate him pulling the ripcord to transform into Chainsaw Man. So it's a pretty good lineup of accessories, and you can get quite a bit out of this figure expression-wise. Now, the sculpt is mostly the same as the Chainsaw Man. Obviously, the forearms and the head are completely different because the Chainsaw Man was transformed. But one thing that was interesting to note is that the shoulders have been redesigned on this figure, and the torso hasn't been redesigned to accommodate for that. So the new shoulders are a little bit smaller than the actual Chainsaw Man figure, and the torso is the same size. So the sort of gap between the torso and shoulder is a lot more prominent, and I think it makes a slightly awkward looking sculpt look even more awkward, because the original Chainsaw Man sculpt is nice, but the joint cuts are super obvious, and it only really looks good when it's in action poses. Whereas this Denji, because he hasn't transformed, he doesn't have as many dynamic poses, although he does have the same dynamic range, but the joints seem just that much more obvious, and I don't think it works that well, especially since everything else is the same on this figure. So the arms are the same sort of size with smaller shoulders, and the torso is the same size with smaller shoulders, so it just looks a bit awkward. That being said, the figure itself is still highly posable and a lot of fun to play with. So he's got a ball joint at the head and neck, so he can look down that far and up that far. His arms can move out that far at the shoulder. They can rotate a full 360. There is a butterfly joint when you activate the shoulders. There is a elbow swivel as well as a forearm swivel. They are independent of each other and a little bit hard to get working separately. There's a hinge at the wrist. There's a ball joint at the upper torso, allows for a bit of side-to-side and rotation. There is a swivel at the waist as well. Denji can kick forward that far and back that far, which is quite good. He's got a good knee bend, ankle rocker, as well as a bend at the toes. He can do the splits that far. And he also has a thigh swivel, which I didn't show. So it's about the same posability as the Chainsaw Man Denji, just without the pointy chainsaws getting in the way of anything. So that's nice. Denji comes with 5 faces, so he's got a standard sort of smiling face. He's got a mouth open bored face. He's got a tongue sticking out sort of devious face, which is used mainly for his Chainsaw Awakening form. He's got a brighter happy face with his eyes looking a bit to the side, or maybe it's the printing on mine, and a completely neutral face. Now, generally, I don't think that a lot of these faces capture Denji, especially his main smiling face out of the box. I think it looks a bit too weird. The bored face looks good, the tongue out face looks pretty good as well. The simple smile face, I'm not too sure of, and the completely dull face, I think, does match Denji quite a bit. And so it's just something is off about the sculpt. I'm not quite sure what it is. I don't know if it's the colors or the shape of the face. It just doesn't read completely as Denji, and I'm not too sure about it. Pochita is also well sculpted and looks really good. All the paintwork is nice on it. And it also comes with swappable faces, so it's got the standard sort of mouth open smiling face. It's got an eyes closed smiling face, as well as a crying face with tears coming down its face, which is pretty sad and heartbreaking. But it all looks really, really good. The seam line is very noticeable on the Pochita, but it's okay because of the sort of angles that you'll be looking at it. You can sort of hide it. But with all of his accessories, you can get Denji and Pochita into some pretty good poses. I especially like how they've designed the sort of ripcord finger and how it fits into his chest. Works quite nicely and is actually more secure than I thought. You can get Denji to hold Pochita, and that works pretty well as well. And they just look really, really good together. All of Denji's accessories are fairly self-explanatory for how they work. Like, he's got a magazine holding hand, peace hands, holding hands for the weapon. He's got these joint hands that you use to cover his face. And they all look pretty decent. Nothing too crazy. You do need to play around with the sculpt a bit to make sure that those shoulders don't look too weird, but it is hard to do unless he's in a straight up action pose. It's very easy to make the sculpt look really wrong, but generally it is still pretty good, and much like the original Chainsaw Man, I'm confident in moving it around pretty much any which way. He pairs well with any other figure from the line, especially Power. And one of the cool things is this figure is also compatible with the original Chainsaw Man. So in the little instructions on the box itself, you can pull off Denji's forearms and swap in the Chainsaw Man blades. And vice versa, you can put those onto the original Chainsaw Man and change the aesthetic of both figures, which is pretty cool. I like that you are given options like that. And again, generally, it's a pretty good figure. The sculpt just doesn't work for it that well, especially because of slight design changes that didn't sort of continue to the rest of the figure. As a figure itself, it's really, really fun, and there's a lot of really good accessories. Some of the faces I don't like, some of the faces I like, but generally it's a pretty damn good figurine. A lot of options, a lot of accessories, a good general loadout, pretty much addresses all the issues that the original Chainsaw Man had, because he had a lack of a lot of this stuff. But overall, pretty good, but I would still probably favor the just transformed Denji or the Power over this figure. But we'll see when they release the Makima and any other future Chainsaw Man figures, because I'm sure that they'll do more on this line. An Aki would be really, really good, especially as comparison to see what they do as opposed to what Figma have done. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.